the cameraman, two cameramen, whoever, whatever, and a well-qualified journalist to come to this place and to highlight it, to interview the guy who is interested in that. I mean, the scientists themselves sometimes have to be forthcoming. They have to a little bit accept the fact that you've got to talk to us. You've got to communicate with us. How can I know that you have something that's really of interest to the audience if you do not inform me? That's a problem. Sometimes, I tell you what we did. We went to the Technion in Israel. They opened up their doors in front of us, and we reported about what they are doing, their researches. We went there. They were reluctant because we were Al Jazeera, and you know their stand towards Al Jazeera. Then we talked to them through our bureau in Jerusalem, and they opened up, and we went there, and we talked about what they are doing. If any university here in Qatar, in any other Arab country, Africa, if they have anything to report, we will go. We will be forthcoming ourselves, and we are ready to invest in that. I'll send the correspondent, and we will do the research. And we did that from London. Our correspondent, Nasser al-Badri, he is really well qualified for these things. We sent him several times, not only in Britain, in Great Britain, but in other countries as well, to cover certain stories, like, as I said before, cloning. There is a story about fertility, women, something like that. There was a lab in Belgium, and where, I don't know, I forgot which country, and he suggested the story, and we funded that story. We sent him. So there is an investment that you've got to undertake, and we are ready to undertake that investment. But doors have to be open. The two, as the gentleman said there, it's a dual carriageway. We should be forthcoming, the two parties.
Just not colliding, on separate tracks. Gervais, I have a question for you, picking up again on something Ahmed said about the difficulty of finding people who are qualified, who have the skills to communicate, to do science journalism. And you teach science journalism at UND University. Do you find there are lots of eager journalists? Do you find that there are people who want to go into this field?
There is a sort of paradox. In the field, you doesn't have so much science journalists, but when you ask them to go to train themselves, it's sometimes difficult because of the communication between scientists and journalists. Journalists always think that science, it's something very, very distant, very difficult. And when you talk of science in a newsroom, you have almost the half of the room inside, outside, and they will not talk about that. Then training science journalists is a kind of challenge. It's a challenge. But what you see is that people who are trained can easily find jobs. People who are in networks like this one, like the Scoop network, can easily find jobs, can easily win prizes, awards, and also, excuse me, they can also, thank you very much. They can also find some news to tell people, but there is still the isolation of science journalists. Let's say in Africa, in Cameroon, you have 4, 5, or 7 science journalists, where they are isolated.
The microphone is editing your comments. I think if we can just,
better, maybe.
I think if we can just stop it there for a minute and just turn to Zainab. Zainab, I have a question, particularly about covering science in the Middle East, because of the cultural and religious context in which you work. Are there issues in science that you can't write about, that you feel uncomfortable covering?
Well,
For me, I don't. I like to cover things that can make some debates, but the problem is that we lack of knowledge of lots of subjects that are considered taboo in the Arab world. So when you try to report about these things, you get lots of negative feedbacks sometimes, but it depends also in the countries, because some Arab countries are different from the other. For example, I work for a Lebanese newspaper. So in Lebanon, with all the diversity that we have, the red lines are different from what are in other Arab countries. I can report about the evolution, for example, the evolution theory, but it will be difficult to report about it in other Arab countries that consider it, that don't know about it, maybe, because
Okay.
they are not, it is not taught in the universities or in the...
Let me give you an example. What if, let's say, next week in America, there is a discovery of the genetic basis of homosexuality? How are you going to cover it? Can you cover it?
Yeah.
Let's talk to our journalists. Gervais, is this something that you could cover, these sort of controversial issues?
Yes, when you teach science journalism, you teach how to cover controversial issues, and you have to cover it as a science journalist. You have to cover it to show people where are the argument for and where are the argument against, and what kind of problems is behind the argument against and the argument for. What is the logic? What is the meaning? What is their world? How they see the world when they say they are against or they are for. You have not to say this is good, this is bad. You are just to show what's the problem and where is the debate.
Patrice, would you be able to present this?
The same thing, just in 2 or 3 words. Scientific journalism is only journalism. Like economical journalism, sport journalism, etc. It's journalism.
Zainab.
The most important thing that we have to talk about is that when we cover journalism, we have to link it. When there is a story like this, when you link it to your society, when you let people know how it will affect their lives and how they can, for example, if there's a health problem, how they can try to avoid it or deal with it, how it affects their daily life, they will accept it. It's not that difficult to do it. And when you have different point of views, if you don't put your point, you don't have to tell people what to think. That's the most important thing about reporting science, because especially with all the subject that can have a debate on it. But the problem in the Arab world that we don't have a debate most of the time, because we don't have to get all the information. We don't have to know. We don't know exactly what this affects our society. So we don't debate about the stem cells. We don't debate about only if it comes to religion, we debate it. But other than that, ethics, we don't debate it.
Ahmed, in your running order, could you put a story like that on the top of the news? Can you press controversial science? Would you say we have to draw the line? It's scientifically significant, but we can't cover it in our part of the world.
We did it.
Oh, okay.
Yes, we covered it. We covered it, and I think even Sheikh Qardawi talked about that thing in his talk show. At Al Jazeera, we have no red lines, no taboos, but it depends on how you are going to debate that thing. Well, is this homosexuality story you talked about, is it a priority for us now to talk about? If we want to promote science journalism in this part of the world, then we have to turn it into a current affairs subject. Yesterday, for example, the internet interruption. We